The Manhattan Project did not begin as a single dramatic moment. It began as a fear, then became a system. During World War II, leaders in the United States and its allies believed Nazi Germany might build an atomic bomb first. That possibility was enough to justify an extraordinary response, a vast research and industrial program designed to turn frontier physics into a usable weapon before the war ended. What makes this story unique is the scale of coordination. This was not one laboratory making one breakthrough. It was a distributed machine spanning governments, universities, industrial contractors, military command, and remote engineering sites. At its peak, it employed around 130,000 people and consumed nearly $2 billion wartime dollars, most of it not on theory, but on giant production plants. In other words, the Manhattan Project was less a science experiment and more a new model of state power, where science, logistics, secrecy, and war planning were fused into one mission with global consequences. Formally, the effort was directed between 1942 and 1946 by Major General Leslie Groves of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Groves was not chosen because he was a physicist. He was chosen because the problem had become organizational: secure land, build cities from nothing, prioritize scarce materials, enforce compartmentalized secrecy, and keep schedules moving under wartime pressure. Scientific leadership came through J. Robert Oppenheimer at Los Alamos, where weapon design was concentrated. That partnership mattered. Groves enforced momentum and discipline at industrial scale. Oppenheimer integrated theoretical and experimental teams to solve design challenges rapidly. The program name also tells a story. It began as the Manhattan District because early headquarters were in Manhattan, and that label eventually replaced the original code name, Development of Substitute Materials. Over time, the name stopped sounding like a district office and started representing an entire hidden nation of factories, reactors, laboratories, and military operations built around one strategic objective. A critical point often missed is that the Manhattan Project pursued two different fissile material routes at the same time: highly enriched uranium and plutonium. This was not redundancy for comfort. It was risk management under uncertainty. In the early years, no one could guarantee which path would deliver a bomb first at practical scale. Uranium enrichment required separating rare uranium-235 from much more common uranium-238, an enormous technical challenge because they are chemically similar and differ mainly in mass. Plutonium required producing a new element inside reactors by irradiating uranium, then chemically separating plutonium from intensely radioactive byproducts. Each route needed different infrastructure, expertise, timelines, and safety protocols. Running both tracks in parallel increased cost massively, but it reduced strategic failure risk. If one path stalled, the other might still succeed. This dual-track logic became a defining feature of the project and explains why its budget concentrated so heavily on construction and operations rather than only theoretical research. For uranium, the center of gravity was the Clinton Engineer Works in Tennessee, widely associated with Oak Ridge. The challenge here was industrializing enrichment methods at a level never attempted. Producing bomb-grade uranium was not a small lab task. It required massive facilities, specialized machinery, energy supply, trained operators, and relentless process control. Entire communities were built around restricted plants where many workers knew only a tiny fragment of what they were doing. One team might monitor gauges, another handle feed material, another maintain critical equipment, while very few understood the full strategic purpose. This compartmentalization was intentional. It protected secrecy and reduced security risk, but it also transformed labor into modular wartime production. Oak Ridge became a symbol of how abstract physics can become concrete through engineering bureaucracy, schedules, shifts, quality checks, and industrial repetition. The final weapon material carried the aura of scientific genius, yet behind it stood ordinary workers performing precise routines inside one of history's most secret industrial systems. The plutonium route centered on Hanford in Washington, where the world's first industrial-scale nuclear reactors were built and operated. If Oak Ridge represented separation technology, Hanford represented controlled nuclear transformation. Reactors generated plutonium inside irradiated uranium fuel, but producing it at scale introduced new engineering realities: heat management, radiation protection, fuel handling, and chemical reprocessing under dangerous conditions. Hanford's mission was not merely to prove reactors could work, it was to produce military-relevant quantities fast enough to influence the war. This required integrating reactor operations with downstream chemical plants that could isolate plutonium from irradiated material. That handoff from physics to chemistry to metallurgy was technically unforgiving and heavily time-constrained. Hanford was supported by a broader network across the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom, showing that the Manhattan Project was multinational even under U.S. leadership. The result was a production pipeline that turned a newly created element into core bomb material within an unprecedented wartime schedule. Weapon design converged at Los Alamos in New Mexico, where scientists and engineers transformed fissile material into actual deliverable devices. Two designs emerged: Little Boy, a uranium gun-type weapon, and Fat Man, a plutonium implosion weapon. At first, implosion was considered lower priority because it was vastly more complex. A gun-type design seemed simpler: rapidly bring subcritical pieces together to reach criticality. But plutonium physics forced a strategic pivot. By 1944, it became clear that reactor-produced plutonium from Hanford contained enough plutonium-240 to make a gun-type approach unreliable due to spontaneous neutron emissions that could cause pre-detonation. That single material fact changed everything. The team had to solve implosion with urgency, which demanded symmetrical compression using precisely timed explosive lenses. This required breakthroughs in diagnostics, detonation timing, metallurgy, and hydrodynamics. Los Alamos became a pressure cooker where theory, computation, high-speed measurement, and engineering improvisation were compressed into one goal: make implosion not just possible, but dependable under combat conditions. The decisive technical proof came with the Trinity test on July 16, 1945, at White Sands Proving Ground in New Mexico. Trinity was the first detonation of a nuclear device in human history, and it tested the implosion design that would later underpin Fat Man. The importance of Trinity was not symbolic alone. It converted theoretical confidence into empirical certainty. Before Trinity, leaders had probabilities and calculations. After Trinity, they had measured blast effects, instrumentation data, and operational confidence that implosion could function as intended. The test also validated the entire system behind it: fissile material production, component fabrication, explosives engineering, assembly procedures, and command coordination under secrecy. A successful test meant the Manhattan Project had crossed the threshold from research program to deployable strategic capability. In military terms, Trinity compressed uncertainty at exactly the moment decision-makers needed clarity. In historical terms, it marked the start of the nuclear age, where one engineered event permanently altered doctrines of war, diplomacy, and global risk. Within weeks, the two wartime bomb designs were used in combat: Little Boy over Hiroshima and Fat Man over Nagasaki in August 1945. The Manhattan Project had not only built devices, it had also developed delivery methods and operational integration for military use. This phase required coordination beyond laboratory science: aircraft modification, crew training, assembly workflows, transport security, and mission planning. The distinction between the two bombs also reflected the project's dual material strategy. Little Boy used enriched uranium in a gun-type configuration and did not require a full-scale prior test in the same way as implosion. Fat Man used plutonium and the complex implosion architecture validated at Trinity. Their use remains one of the most contested decisions in modern history, with enduring debates over military necessity, civilian casualties, diplomatic signaling, and alternatives. But from an institutional perspective, the bombings demonstrated that a state-directed fusion of science and industry could produce strategic effects at unprecedented speed and destructive scale, reshaping global power calculations immediately. Another dimension of the Manhattan Project was intelligence warfare. Through Operation Alsos, project personnel moved through Europe, sometimes near or behind front lines, to assess the German nuclear effort, seize materials, capture documents, and locate scientists. This mission mattered for two reasons. First, it tested the original fear that had helped justify the project: was Germany truly close to an atomic weapon? Second, it prevented sensitive knowledge and materials from dispersing unpredictably as the war collapsed. Alsos demonstrated that scientific competition in wartime was inseparable from intelligence operations. Laboratories were linked to battlefields, and physicists could become strategic targets. At the same time, the project's own security system was not impermeable. Soviet spies penetrated the program despite strict compartmentalization and surveillance. That fact exposed a structural reality: even highly secret megaprojects are vulnerable when they involve huge workforces and rapid collaboration. The immediate wartime race was ending, but the information extracted from Manhattan would soon accelerate the next geopolitical race. After the war, the Manhattan Project did not simply shut down. It transitioned into a post-war nuclear infrastructure that shaped the next era. It oversaw weapons testing at Bikini Atoll under Operation Crossroads, expanded and refined weapon designs, supported medical and radiological research, and helped establish the foundation for the U.S. nuclear navy. Just as important, the project's institutions evolved into the network of national laboratories that continue to influence science, defense, and energy policy. Administrative control also changed. Until January 1947, Manhattan structures still managed U.S. atomic research and production, after which authority passed to the United States Atomic Energy Commission. That transfer signaled a shift from emergency wartime mobilization to permanent state stewardship of nuclear capability. In effect, Manhattan created not only bombs but a governance template for high-consequence technology, centralized funding, elite scientific concentration, classified research channels, and long-term federal oversight. Its legacy therefore lives in institutions as much as in historical events. To understand why the Manhattan Project remains so significant, it helps to see it as a turning point in how modern states solve extreme problems. It proved that when political urgency, scientific talent, industrial capacity, and military command are aligned, transformation can occur at extraordinary speed. But it also revealed the costs of that model: secrecy that limits democratic visibility, ethical dilemmas deferred to crisis moments, and technologies whose consequences outlast their original context. The project's success in technical terms opened a permanent strategic condition: nuclear deterrence, arms competition, and the need for continuous control systems to prevent catastrophe. It also changed public expectations of science. Research was no longer only a path to knowledge, it became an instrument of national survival and geopolitical leverage. The Manhattan Project is, therefore, not just a chapter of World War II. It is the blueprint for the modern high-stakes alliance between science and state power, with lessons that still apply to every transformative technology race today. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.